time traveling in Warframe. I mean, finally, this gate has been opened, right? To see exactly what happened in the past of Warframe, what the prototypes of Warframes are like, how did the Orokin come into existence, and get to the cosmic power they were revered as. So many questions have the potential to be answered. Whisper in the Wall story may be a short one, but it certainly expanded upon the universe of Warframe in an absolutely gargantuan way. Now, before we dive headfirst into this explanation, there is a pretty large recap we may need to go over before we can even begin to understand what's going on in this newest update. There are terms that may be completely unknown to you, because I know I certainly didn't know them. So I will briefly go over the most relevant story and every term that you will need to know. If you already know, you may reference the chapters in this video's description. Let's begin. Prior to the New War, we met the Entradi family of the Orokin race on Deimos. Deimos is a moon of Mars that was used as a base of experimentation for the Entradi. They conducted numerous experiments, but they were revered for their knowledge on one topic: the Void. The enigmatic dimension that seems to harbor paracausality. Paracausal being a word for anything that would violate causality. Think of it as anything that goes against the simple relationship of cause and effect, as in things that happen here just happen and don't have a feasible reason why. With the Orokin being a precursor to all the crazy technology in this universe, their interest in the Void was inevitable. And one man in the Entradi knew how much of an asset it would be to the Orokin prior to its discovery. Even with virtually no evidence of its existence, sheer tenacity made Albrecht Entradi proceed. When the Orokin began to overpopulate, Albrecht took his time studying the Void, trying to prove that it was there and useful.
Than any other. When I stepped inside the bell, I saw no crowd through its glass, no skeptical onlookers, no regal send-off. They all had given up on me and my paradoxical formulations. The wasted years have all shown the Void to be just that. Nothing. No energy, no entanglement, no form to spacefaring ambitions.
Albrecht went so many years with no conclusive proof of the Void's existence. Most of all, the Orokin backing his project had given up. Out of frustration, Albrecht opened a portal to this Void and stumbled into the Wall Between Worlds. There he found the most terrifying entity in Warframe, known as the Indifference, the Vitruvian Man, the man in the wall.
Riss, light, the senselessness of it, the paradoxic, the vague, untimed form. I was alone, but not, for I stood there confronted by myself, a twin but no brother, a reflection but with dimension. Behind him, no horizon but a vast broiling sea of caustic light pierced at random by black pin stars, and closer, around me, a gale of flowing vapor, profane in color, billowing relentlessly into the nascent lack, seeking all directions. I was standing on a precipice of familiar stone, jagged and unanchored as though cleaved directly from the very floor of my laboratory. I wondered at the vapor's path, smoking outward more, leaving behind now the walls, the filigree gold, the rare cuts of marble from my home. I knew at once the vapor's source. I turned away, back toward the wall, the trapezoid I had yawed into it. Vapor erupted inward at the gap, but not just from there. For as I rolled my eyes back, I saw the same. A great steam of scintillation smoking out from my skull. Dumb in awe, I faced toward my chimerical twin. He spoke.
It appeared to him as a massive doppelganger chasing him out of the Void. After escaping its clutches, Albrecht was wounded. Numerous lacerations from the portal's edge, eyes blinded by Void light, and his voice stolen. Though his senses were taken from him, he could feel the entity reaching out of the Void, though he could not scream. He desperately scraped up broken glass from the floor, squeezing until ink flowed from his veins. Writing on the floor, closed the gate. His daughter quickly shut the Wall Between Worlds, slicing the entity's fingers clean off.
With the shred of wit that remained, I decided that I should run for my life. At once, crazed and frantic, I fled. But I made no forward progress. Instead, the world compressed ever more around me, as though I were an anchor pulling the shore to reach. When I arrived at the door, or rather, the door arrived at me, I howled, hurling myself inside, out. And then and there I was, lost and unlost, howling on the floor in harmony with my wretched Kalimos, lacerated in flesh and heart, scattered as the bell glass, spilling blood and stomach on the cold stone floor. But I sensed the other there at the wall's breach behind me, reaching still. I screamed, but my voice was gone. Forever. I looked, but my eyes would never see again. I swept my fist across the floor, snatching broken shards, and in gripping tightly, I filled my hands with ink. "Close it," I wrote.
Albrecht escaped. Just barely. Not only is the void very real, but there's something else in there. Its finger still remains, used as a source for almost unlimited energy in the Railjack's reliquary drive. That ends what we've learned from the logs before the quest. Now all we know is that sometime before the infested biobomb went off on Deimos to deter the sentients, Albrecht disappeared. Prior to the Whisper in the Wall story, we've had many encounters with the Indifferents. Chains of Harrow when he'd pop up in our ship after we find and defeat Rel, a Tenno that was possessed by the Man in the Wall after holding him back from the rest of the Tenno. Chimero Prologue, laughing while wearing Lotus's headgear. Lastly, the New War when we get to see what may be his true form, resembling Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Each time he appears, he is a doppelganger of the Tenno, except the last time. At the end of the New War, we are shown that the Indifference is either A, getting stronger, or B, gaining more freedom. Yet we still don't know what it is. It clearly is a metaphysical being capable of many different paracausal feats. Metaphysical meaning something outside of human comprehension, essentially transcending the physical laws of nature, yet he is still interacting with the physical and we barely can interact with him. Which leads us finally to the Whisper in the Walls, where we have the most interaction with him ever. When this quest begins, we are met with what is presumably Albrecht entering a coffin, a time machine, saying those words to the real Lloyd. This happened sometime in the past. Back to the present, the construct Lloyd or Necroloid beckons you to Deimos, claiming that he had a dream. From this dream, he only remembers a name, that name being Kalimos. Necroloid leads you to the laboratory of Master Entradi, or Albrecht Entradi, in search of the sleeper needed to continue the Kalimos sequence. You and Necroloid are met with strange but familiar moans, and you are urged to push forward in search of the sleeper. En route to the sleeper, you find Albrecht's grimoire, a tome that was used like a diary for Albrecht. The interesting thing about the tome is that it seems to adapt to your needs, becoming a powerful weapon, although its origin is unknown as well as how it actually works. As if the threat of the indifference wasn't enough, you are shown a bit more of its staggering capabilities. Fighting enemies that have no origin nor explanation. Maybe they're just void monstrosities.
The Kalimos sequence has begun? Did he send you? Is he? No. No, of course he didn't. That would be impossible.
This is, well, Lloyd, the original. All emotional centers very much intact. Did you have a good sleep?
Ah, the helpful Necroloid my Albrecht had made, so that I might have assistance and company. Perhaps that made it easier for him to leave. Resume your duties, construct.
Resume your duties, construct.
Please, follow me.
This is a Tenno, an orphan of the void. Continuing the struggle our master abandoned.
A Tenno. A deserter, presumably. Is it not aware there's a war going on?
The sleeper is awoken soon after and revealed to be the real Lloyd. He immediately knows that he was awoken for the Kalimos sequence, but doesn't know how long he has been asleep. Lloyd mentions a war going on currently, but he couldn't be speaking of the new war. It just happened. This means that he was put to sleep during the old war, when the Orcans still ruled.
Tenno, while Lloyd completes his inspections, you'd better meet the Cavia, a reminder of darker times. Though Master Entradi always hoped the awaited operator would be able to understand them.
After arriving back to Santa and Atomica, you are told about the Cavia. Cavia are, ironically, guinea pigs. In Warframe, they are animals that were used for experimentation in the Void. Lloyd refers to you as the chosen operator mentioned in the Kalimos sequence, but since you can't understand the Cavia, he becomes skeptical, expressing not only disdain with you, but something deeper towards Albrecht.
Albrecht left a great deal incomplete. The vessels are unfinished, like a book one might one day return to. Operable, barely. The sequence dictates I am to wait for their operator. Clearly that cannot be you.
Oh, it can be. Tenno, Master Entradi's grimoire suggests you are the key. That colorless antique there? Use it.
Vessels are giant bodies that have a similar purpose to Warframes except much larger. Their use is still unknown, coupled with the fact that Albrecht clearly intended you to use them. Necroloid refutes Lloyd's skepticism and tells you to use the vintage computer on the desk, which diverts your transference stream to the vessel. Panicking in the body of the vessel, it is unclear whether or not you are transported or reliving a memory of a man named Arthur. The date is December 31st, 1999, the turn of the century. After cleaving through the infested, you meet with Albrecht. Maybe. I don't believe that this is Albrecht because Lloyd says the indifference is still on his heels when you get back to him. This to me is the most impactful moment in the story. It can mean a few things, but the two that are the most important are A, the man in the wall can time travel, or B, time doesn't apply to it, referring to eternalism. Past, present, and future being theoretically real always. Both are equally terrifying, though.
So, Albrecht made it to 1999 in one piece. But that thing is still on his heels. Albrecht rarely smiled after his return from the void. And never like that. I smashed the casket for nothing! It followed him anyway! Silence, creatures! It seems the murmur overloaded your connection. Unfortunately for Albrecht's cherished POM 2, not as future-proof as the label claimed. Alas. The murmur. They're attacking the sensory network I installed. Our eyes and ears. To arms, Tenno! Play the warrior, and leave the tactics to me.
Monstrosities from the void earlier are now dubbed the Murmur and are attacking the laboratory's sensory network. During the fight, the cavia struggle to communicate with you. The fish cavia calls to you and your doppelganger joins in once again. Lloyd is ever frustrated with the cavia and he sends you to the Netracells. Think of them as treasure vaults similar to those on Deimos. They require a key glyph to access and one of the cavia happily oblige. Before reaching the first terminal, the indifference provokes Lloyd and it works almost too well. What becomes increasingly noticeable is that you aren't his focal point like normal.
Look at these things lying around, abandoned.
You are his, demon, not mine.
Instructed by Albrecht, you head to your orbiter and craft the Jahu Gargoyle. Jahu meaning form, and gargoyles are usually part man, part beast, symbolic of a ward against evil spirits. The gargoyle grants speech to the cavia, and they tell you what the man in the wall hinted toward.
You've given yourself a role in this sequence?
Indeed we have. Come, Lloyd. It's named after Papa's favorite pet. Spare the rod and spoiled. We know the fragmented ones are heralds of the indifference. We know the chosen operator must summon and destroy them. And regrettably, you, Lloyd, have made this impossible.
Choose your words carefully, fish.
Tenno, The grimoire is incomplete. The final page hidden away by Lloyd. Be a darling and retrieve it. That's all. Run along.
The final battle begins as an indifference-harboring vessel launches a full-scale assault on the Santa Anatomica. Lloyd gets to peak frustration and fights the fragmented tide with you. The climax of the battle ends with something that is convoluted yet informative. Why would I consider that informative? It's because
We had created monsters we couldn't control. We drugged them, tortured them, eviscerated them. We brutalized their minds, but it did not work. Until they came. And it was not their force of will, not their void devilry, not their alien darkness. It was something else. It was that somehow, from within the derelict horror, they had learned a way to see inside an ugly, broken thing. And take away its pain.
the main idea of this story is centered around emotion, and it has very little to do with you now at least. There simply is just too little information to formulate a motive of the indifference, as his actions and hints don't make sense. I also suppose they won't make sense until the next major update. Regardless, I'd like to briefly go over everything he said in this story, as I feel as though most of his speech had a level of importance unlike the other times we've seen him.
I'd crawl away in shame too if I'd done what Lloyd did. Doesn't that grimoire feel a little light?
Here, the first time you see him, he immediately intends to shake your trust in Lloyd, almost helping you, but why?
You're right, Fish. Lloyd can never figure things out. We have nothing to worry about.
Your doppelganger mocks Lloyd, indirectly stating that this is all for a higher purpose, but Lloyd's heightened emotions toward Albrecht would never let him see that. Things that obviously showed that the Cavia had a higher aptitude were ignored by Lloyd. Not to say that he didn't know, more like he didn't care. He felt used by Albrecht. Therefore, he projected those feelings onto everyone and everything.
Look at these things lying around, abandoned.
This interaction shows us exactly what we're dealing with. The indifference still hasn't mentioned us much at all, this time completely ignoring us to taunt Lloyd's emotions even further as matters become increasingly worse.
You should have left well enough alone, kiddo. It'll never get better if you keep on picking at it.
To leave well enough alone is an idiom. It means if you don't stop disturbing someone or something, it'll get worse. In this case, he is referring to Lloyd, ergo he is urging us to let it happen.
Tick-tock, kiddo. You don't want to be late again, do you?
Here, your doppelganger is making a clear reference to what happened in 1999. It clearly has something to do with the turn of the century, but what that means in Warframe terms is unknown. The turn of the century made people paranoid that the world would end, and all the computers would stop working due to the extra zero. Still, I couldn't find anything that could even hint to a bit of a story element.
How about you give me the page instead, kiddo? Consider it part of our deal.
The deal was one made for us to gain our powers and make it out of the void alive, but what we promised is still very much unknown. Several times throughout the story, this deal is referenced, and whilst it is clear that this is where our powers come from, the indifference never tells us what he wants, only emphasizing that we owe him something constantly. This reinforces my stance that he wants to see you succeed, just for his own purposes.
We had a deal. The deal was shook. A little handshake, all it took. Though from the deal, the wee child ran.
Yet still, we end as we began.
You can see our doppelganger is tearing apart a lotus, which is a representation of our surrogate mother, Lotus. But the obvious homage is to the Lulk poem, written on the Requiem mods. From brooding gulfs are we beheld, by that which bears no name. Its heralds are the stars it fells, the sky and earth aflame. Corporeal laws are unwrit, as suns in love retreat. To cosmic madness laws submit, though stalwart minds entreat. In luminous space blackened stars, they gaze, accuse, deny. Rolling, moaning this realm of ours, in madness lost shall die. Carrion hordes trill their profane, accord with eldritch plans. To cosmic forms from tangent planes, we end as we began. I believe this poem is speaking about existence in itself. Maybe the origin of everything is in the void, in a constant cycle. Regardless of whether or not that is true makes no difference, as the overall theme of The Man in the Wall seems to be inevitability. The concept of eternalism reigns true here as well, but we'll end it here simply because the rabbit hole is too deep for this video. In conclusion, this story had more to do with The Man in the Wall and Lloyd than you. Emotion was the forefront and perhaps even the driving factor of the antagonist. Lloyd's emotion followed suit with every high point. As his frustration increased, so did our conflict. It seemed as though the Man in the Wall grew stronger with his mood, feeding off of the emotion. That alone would make the climax make sense. When Lloyd calmed, so did the indifference. This is also supported even further by the fact your doppelganger wanted you to leave the situation alone, like we're interrupting something. That could just be my interpretation though. If you guys like this video, feel free to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. If you love this video, feel free to watch the others on my channel. It won't always be a Warframe video, but I promise it'll be a damn good story. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year. See ya.